Laura needs to be prepared, because long ago our ancestors weren't. And the Avatar let us down.
I've been waiting to make this type of video for a long time. I've been waiting for the right moment because I knew that there was going to be a moment where my voice was needed. And I'm going to tell you, if you're a Korra defender, if you're a lover of The Legend of Korra, your voice is fucking needed right now. Because we have seen a decade-long manufacturing of hate against this character. I mean, this is very predictable given the type of environment that we've developed into with media analysis. Korra low-key was the blueprint to a lot of these big backlashes that happened to a lot of the TV shows and movies that we now have, such as Captain Marvel. That was another one that was very large and very disproportionate. Korra really was kind of the blueprint to that, because from the jump, people were judging Korra completely irrationally. The truth is that the rest of us watched the show and we know that Korra got the roughest deal ever of any Avatar, right? She was the Avatar when the harmonic convergence happened and Vatu, you know, returned essentially. It's looking more and more like that's the explanation for what's happening in Seven Havens. Not that it's because of Korra opening the spirit world, not because of any action that she personally took, because the circumstances around her were setting her up to fail. That is the obvious misdirection they're taking with Avatar Seven Havens. If Korra genuinely was the villain, why would they immediately launch this trailer telling us all that she's the villain? It makes no sense. They're obviously setting her up to be exonerated later on in the show. And this tracks almost exactly with what happened to Korra as a series and the backlash that happened against her. People completely misinterpreted all of her actions constantly, judged them based on merits that nobody else was being judged on. And the reason I can tell this is because when you talk about Korra with people who are staunch Korra haters, right? You explain to them her decision making and you compare it to any other character, particularly male characters. Watch them defend those male characters every single time. And I'm gonna give you one example. All of the conflicts that Korra dealt with throughout her seasons of The Legend of Korra were all consequences of Aang and Zuko's actions. I'm gonna hold your hands when I say this. Aang and Zuko created an oligarchy, okay? The council that led Republic City up until Book 2 of Legend of Korra was unelected. They were appointed by the governments of their respective nations. That means that Tarlok was put in his position because Unalaq put him in that position. And likewise, the Earth Kingdom representative was put there because the Earth Queen put that person in that position. And it can also be assumed that the Fire Nation representative was put there by Azumi, by Zuko's daughter. And we also know that Sokka eventually becomes the chieftain of the Southern Water Tribe. He eventually has a position on the council. So all of the events that we see in The Legend of Korra with Amon and the non-benders, right? And the lack of representation non-benders have in their society, which is vast, right? I mean, non-benders make up the majority of Republic City, yet they have no voting representation at all in the city until The Legend of Korra Season 2 when they elect a president. Before that, the non-benders in the city were expected to have representation within the nations that they previously were a part of, right? And these are immigrants after generations. Some of these immigrants had no connection to their previous nation. The council did not represent the interests of any of the Republic Nation's citizens. It represented the interests of foreign nations. And that's exactly why there was an uprising that happened during Season 1 of The Legend of Korra. And who set that system up? It was Aang and Zuko, and we see it even more clearly in Avatar: Aang the Last Airbender, the film, where Katara has a direct role in the government of Republic City. You can see that this is clearly the start of the council that we see eventually take place in The Legend of Korra Season 1. And Katara here is likely the first representative of the Southern Water Tribe. That's not an elected position, right? That's a position that she was given because of her proximity to the Avatar. And I'm not saying Katara is a bad character. I mean, there was definitely some corruption happening. I mean, there were homeless children on the street living and surviving without any social safety nets. So clearly Republic City and the United Republic of Nations was very, very corrupt and very, very disorganized far before Korra ever set foot in the city. And really, when Korra comes to Republic City, she in fact is doing so much to prevent the worst outcome. Because this revolution was going to happen happen regardless of if Korra was involved or not. And what Korra was able to do is disempower Amon and expose him for who he was, which was a bloodbender. Without Korra, his coup would have been completely successful and the United Republic of Nations would have not existed. It would have been taken over by equalists. And let's be clear, the only reason that the United Republic of Nations eventually becomes a democracy is because of that equalist revolution that happens. They realize that there is a huge disenfranchisement happening of the majority of the citizens in Republic City, and that they need to reform their government to have an elected official, a president, which is still a position that has a lot of corruption, but it is at least marginally better than having unelected officials appointed by foreign nations. And ironically, this exact systemic rot is what causes eventually the Southern Water Tribes to have a civil war, and then for Kuvira to create a nationalistic military campaign to unite the Earth Kingdom. Because before Book 2 of Korra, the Southern Water Tribe and the Northern Water Tribe both had representation within the United Republic of Nations. If Unalaq tried to invade the Southern Water Tribe, the United Republic of Nations would have immediately started to get into a civil conflict, and it's likely they would have committed their military to defending the Southern Water Tribe. But once President Raiko is elected, he immediately refuses to give military aid to the Southern Water Tribe, which is what allows Unalaq to invade the South, and ultimately what allows Unalaq to eventually take control of both spirit portals and then sever Korra's connection to her past lives, and threaten the world with 10,000 years of darkness. And the situation with Kuvira is even more damning. Kuvira has a legitimate claim to the territory within the United Republic of Nations. This territory was seized by the Fire Nation and rewarded to the United Republic of Nations under the conditions of the government that Aang created, which included representation for the Earth Kingdom over that territory. They had a representative who overlooked that specific territory that was appointed by the Earth Kingdom. So when this reform happens, they lose all control over that territory, and regardless of if you think that should or should not have happened, it created a predictable problem. The Earth Queen was assassinated, then a power vacuum emerged. All of these things could have been avoided if they developed a democracy from the start of Republic City instead of creating an oligarchy, which means that all of the problems that Korra faced throughout her entire time as Avatar would have never happened if Aang and Zuko simply planned out their nation state better. And these were decisions that affected hundreds of thousands or probably millions of people across the United Republic of Nations. Mako and Bolin were both made orphans when their parents were killed and then had to resort to crime and living on the street. I'm not trying to unfairly blame the gang for all of the problems that happened in The Legend of Korra. I'm just trying to give context to how a lot of you sound when you start to pick apart everything that Korra does throughout her entire series without putting any of the context in what happened before. And likewise, I know this is about to happen with Seven Havens. We're about to see the most disingenuous people all take this show at face value and how they criticize Korra. And when inevitably this show exonerates Korra and tells us the full picture of what happened, they're gonna turn on this show and start hating on it. Did Korra make mistakes throughout her life? Of course she did, right? No Avatar makes no mistakes throughout their life. Like, no person does. Korra, like Aang and Roku, were put in an extreme position of power at a very young age and did not always respond the best with that power. However, when you start looking at the actions of Korra as a teenager who's thrust into a position of power and who's also constantly being doubted, despite being the only person around her taking decisive action to prevent the oncoming disaster, you can start to see why the Korra hate seems a little forced. All I'll say is join us. Korra did nothing wrong. She didn't ruin the Avatar cycle, she saved it. And she likely didn't destroy the world. She probably prevented some horrific outcome. And what we see is the world, like the fans, turning on her because they don't understand the context of her actions. If you like this video, please go ahead, leave a like and leave a subscription. I'm gonna make more Avatar Last Airbender, Legend of Korra, and Avatar 7 Havens content in the future. So if you'd like to see more, make sure to subscribe, and I'll talk to you all in my next video.